We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
If this were a Reese's TV ad, you'd be staring at a Reese's peanut butter cup. And sure, my voice is peanut buttery smooth, but still, you need to see the peanut butter cups, right? No? I can really just say Reese's and you'll go get some? Okay, Reese's. 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 Really working, actually. Reese's. Reese's. I'm on to something. Reese's. Reese's. Reese's.
If you're a maintenance supervisor for a commercial property, you've had to deal with everything from leaky faucets to flickering light bulbs. But nothing's worse than that ancient boiler that's lived in the building since the day it was built, 50 years ago. It's enough to make anyone lose their cool. That's where Grainger comes in. With industrial-grade products and dependable fast delivery, Grainger can help with any challenge. From worn-out components to everyday necessities. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
At Verizon, anyone can trade in their old phone for a new one on us with Unlimited Ultimate, which means everyone in your family could get a new phone and stay on your family plan, keeping you close.
Hey, Mom, you seen my toothbrush?
Yeah, I'm almost done with it.
Oh, maybe too close. Trade in and additional terms apply. See Verizon.com for details.
Hello, this is international football commentator Derek Ray, and you're listening to the Ranks FC podcast.
Hello, Rank Squad, and welcome to Champions League Takeaway here on Ranks FC, the first Champions League takeaway of 2025. And what a couple of days of football we have to talk about. Thrills and spills absolutely everywhere. Pleasure and pain in equal amounts as we come towards the denouement of this Champions League stage for the first time in history. My name's Jack Collins and I'll be your host today. And joining me all the way across the water in San Diego, it's Mr. Dean Jones. How you doing, mate?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. I mean, this new format of the Champions League is certainly taken everybody by surprise. Not least of all, some of the best teams in Europe who don't seem to know how to actually deal with this kind of situation. It's like, okay, well, teams like Brest are managing to deal with it, but if you're like a giant of European football, you're like Real Madrid or PSG or Man City, you've been like, whoa, what's going on here? And we're now in a situation where we probably will have a high-profile exit of some sort. So, yeah, I think the last couple of days have been pretty wild, and I'm excited to get stuck into it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could have started on either day today, right? There were absolute madnesses across both days, but we will start with the action that's just finished, Wednesday night's action. And the headline tie of this was Manchester City visiting Paris Saint-Germain. Now, this would have been a big game no matter where the two teams were in the league table. It would have been a big game considering the position of both managers, not necessarily that either are going to be removed from their jobs, but also both ex-Barcelona managers. They've spoken glowingly about each other in the build-up to this game. you look at it and you think Manchester City have come out of the back of a dreadful run of form towards the end of 2024. There were question marks over whether they had turned it around with that big win over Ipswich at the weekend. Easy to forget that 2 days or 3 days before that, they ended up throwing away a 2-0 lead away at Brentford. So I wasn't completely convinced that all the answers had been had. From a PSG perspective, they're streaking away at the top of Liga, undefeated in Liga across the season, but their Champions League form has been poor, and Luis Enrique has had to answer questions about that. They signed Kvaratskhelia, but not able to play in these Champions League last 2 games until the stages reset and the knockouts begin, if PSG were going to get there. But a big result in Paris. Manchester City 2-0 up just after the break. PSG 4, Manchester City 2.
Oh my goodness, mate. Absolutely ludicrous. I mean, earlier on today, Ruben Amorim said he regrets saying that Man United are like the worst team ever, basically. And I've got to say, I regret on the main episode this week saying that Man United were the worst team around, because they're not. The most disappointing team in Europe is Man City, and you can underline that because I'm not having it anymore. They are actually having a worse season than Man United. It's all very well smashing Ipswich and smashing Salford, but losing to PSG, losing to Man United, losing to Juve, losing to Liverpool, losing to Tottenham, basically losing to anyone that considers themselves to be a rival of some sort to you is a nightmare and a disaster all rolled into one. And the manner of this capitulation is like humiliating. And this was supposed to be over. This version of Man City that rolls over is supposed to be done. And this game should have been done at 2-0. Like, we still had a long part of the second half to play. But when Erling Haaland managed to score that second goal, it should have been enough. But do you know what? As soon as that first goal went in for PSG, you feared the worst for them. Now, City managed to get in front of this game by showing aggression in the way that they attacked. And there were these bold, daring runs into the final third. And we haven't seen that much of that, but it was good to see. And then as soon as PSG managed to do it once to them and Mateus Nunes gets skinned and PSG get themselves back into the game, City show us all that they haven't got any aggression going the other way. And I will say it time and time over again, but I don't know if any team has ever missed one player more than Man City missed Rodri. And I mean, I know it's boring, but there's no one there. The defensive midfield area is completely empty and their legs just go, their heads go. So as soon as that goal comes, even the commentator said it again, he starts talking about the Feyenoord game and if we're all thinking it, and there's no way the Man City players aren't thinking it, and we saw it on the pitch, all the insecurities were there and PSG kind of preyed on it, on those vulnerabilities. Now, look, City could now head out of the Champions League, which is incredible in itself. I mean, they probably just about will avoid it, but if they don't win that next game, then they're in big trouble.
If they don't win the next game, they're out. It's done. But they do have the kind of luxury of this shootout with Club Brugge, because obviously at the Etihad, you look at the two teams, City on 8 points, Brugge on 11, and City with a superior goal difference means that a win guarantees them jumping above their opponents. And that would be enough, I think, to actually end up with them in the knockout phases. But still, Pep Guardiola came out before this game, and I thought it was really interesting. We were talking about it on the radio today, about the fact that he came out and basically said, look, it's not do or die here. If we lose, we can still qualify in that final game. And that felt really un-Pep Guardiola to me. You know, it's not to say that they went out with the intention of losing this game. That's not what I'm getting at whatsoever. They clearly didn't do that. But even to be defeatist enough to kind of acknowledge the idea that they might not go out and win this game felt like quite a strange tack for him to start going down at this point. Like, don't worry, if it all goes wrong here, then at least we've got the final game and it will be okay. He's right? I get that. And they will be okay if they beat Club Brugge. But Club Brugge have proved tough opposition over the course of this Champions League campaign. They've been a very, very good side. Their pressing is incredibly intense. And I think they will cause City problems, especially this iteration of Manchester City. But equally, it felt a bit of a weird thing to come out with and say. It was almost like, you know, the Pep of old, or the Pep kind of who feels his team are informed, but just like, we'll just go and get the job done. I don't know why everyone's talking about this as if it's a problem. We'll get it done. And to kind of move away from that suggests that he understands the frailties that are within this team, the frailties that were exposed here.
He's scared of putting pressure on him, I think. I think he just doesn't want him to be overburdened at all. I think he doesn't want him to feel anxious. And unfortunately, it's now a trait that is ingrained in them, I think. There was a certain anxiety about PSG themselves coming into this game, and they put on a big show before kickoff and stuff, and it was all very hyped up. And, these are two huge European clubs. City fans are taunting PSG, champions of Europe, you'll never sing that, and all those sorts of things. But you come away from it, and yeah, it's a humiliating moment for me. And I just don't know what we get now out of this Man City team and how we really assess where we're at with them. Because, as I say, we thought that this was over. I don't just mean like this game, I mean like the problems. And as soon as this has happened, it's certainly as bad as what happened against Feyenoord. Probably not worse, because PSG are obviously better than Feyenoord. But to throw away a 2-goal lead like this is really, really bad. And the big problem with it all was that they just looked like shadows, and they were just disappearing in front of our eyes. Some of the game, they actually played quite well, and on the front foot, Mateus Nunes actually looked quite good, and when he stormed through the centre of the field to set one of the goals, he's looking good. And Akanji on the first one forces his way through, really good. But then they just can't maintain that. This should have been a night. It could have been a night when we're like, oh, Jack Grealish has scored a really important goal. Man City have won 2-0. This is all on the up and up for Man City. But you look at it now, Grealish won't even be spoken about. And I'm just not sure what Pep Guardiola is going to do to lift this team again.
It's a weird one, isn't it? Because in some ways it was a tale of two substitutes, because Jack Grealish comes on and he scores the opener. Lovely finish, actually. Very, very controlled finish. And then basically does all the work to set up the second goal, which is a little bit fortunate, but Erling Haaland ends up forcing it into the back of the net. And you're thinking, wow, masterstroke from Pep. He's made those changes on the half. He's brought on Grealish to give City a bit more control, because they were a little bit on the ropes, I think, in the first half of this one. PSG obviously had a goal disallowed, etc., etc. But they take this 2-0 advantage, and you're thinking, that is a masterstroke. And then suddenly Ousmane Dembele, who's introduced at halftime from a PSG perspective, just takes control of the game. Now, he scores the opener after brilliant, brilliant work from Bradley Barcola, who feels like he's had a rocket lit up under him since PSG's interest in Kvara was basically firmed up. And obviously he's now joined the club, and Barcola must be like, hang on, that's my spot on the left-hand side. I want that one. Now, I actually do think that Luis Enrique will work out a way where both of those two players play. I think Gonzalo Ramos will continue to be his kind of super sub option as a number 9, and he might end up playing with a different type of system that allows Dembele, Kvaratskhelia and Barcola to all play through the middle. I think that it will end up being Barcola as a kind of 9 at this point. But equally, the step he makes to send Mateus isn't a right back, right? He's been forced into an unfamiliar position there, and it's a lovely bit of skill from Barcola. But even the City defenders at that point, they don't make the right decisions. It's Akanji who, instead of just blocking the passing lane, decides he's going to follow Barcola, and it leaves Dembele open for the tap-in. Dembele then goes just super saiyan. Now, he's been brilliant in recent weeks, and there's always been a lot of chat about his consistency, his ability to finish. Those things have gone quiet recently, because I think it's 6 in 7 now after today that he's scored, and he missed the first half through flu, and he's been PSG's most influential player in recent weeks. So him coming on and making a difference shouldn't necessarily shock anyone. But equally, the way that he just took hold of this game was remarkable. And it does remind you that there is a reason people were so excited about Ousmane Dembele in the first place. There's a reason that Barcelona paid all that money for him. There's a reason that PSG paid all that money to get him from Barcelona. Yes, he can frustrate, but when he is on form and on song, there are few people and few players in the world who can light up a game in the same kind of capacity.
Yeah, definitely. We'll see whether he can continue to produce that. Would be good to see him do that. But Barcola, I thought, was really good. And João Neves, I forget sometimes just how good this guy is.
He's outrageous.
He's just so
take the goal out of it. take the goal out of it, because the goal is absolutely dreadful defending. How they've just completely left him free, smallest man on the pitch, getting a completely free header at the back post.
Yeah, it's not about that at all.
But his performance in the middle, he is such a dynamo. I love watching him play so much. And look, this was a game and a performance that, we've talked a lot about PSG and their whole Parisian roots thing. And obviously that has worked its way back into it. Barca, Desiree Doué, a lot of players who, have kind of come through on that kind of point, or been brought in because they are local players who PSG want to kind of push through, but very much made in Portugal as well. Obviously, João Neves scores, Gonçalo Ramos scores. I thought Vitinha was excellent as well in the midfield. There was a real Portuguese flavour to this win from PSG, and it does make it makes it interesting that they've got that Parisian Portuguese combination thing going on.
Yeah, absolutely does. But yeah, it was a great second half. Like it was fascinating to watch. I had to do a school run in the middle of it all too, so I was watching it on my phone as the goals, like the first couple flying as I'm leaving the house, and then I'm watching them as I walk up there. Very surreal. Completely not connected with what was going on around me. I'm surprised a car didn't hit me or something, because as I crossed the road when PSG brought it back to equalise. But a really good game, entertaining one.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I mean, you said earlier that this result was not as bad as the Feyenoord one because PSG are a better team than Feyenoord. Don't know about that, because Feyenoord won 3-0 at De Kuip against Bayern Munich in what was a dazzling display of clinicality, I think is probably how I would describe it. They were very, very much against the ball here. Bayern had nearly 80% of the possession. I think they had 26 shots on goal, Bayern, and they lose the game 3-0. And Santi Jimenez scores an absolutely glorious opener. Ball over the top. He traps it so well. It's a lovely, lovely finish. And Bayern looked a bit shell-shocked because they've kind of had all of the ball up to that point, but not done very much with it. They looked a little bit lethargic. Now, some injury worries from a Bayern perspective. Alphonso Davies limped off again. He's just come back from a long-term injury. So to see him limping off at that point was a shame. They brought on Rafa Guerreiro and you thought, okay, that'll be all right. But the second goal that Bayern concede on the stroke of half-time is comical. Like comical. They have a corner, Bayern. They whip it into the box. No one attacks it. And then Feyenoord break 4-on-2, and they should do far better with it. Instead, the pass out wide is really quite poor. And just as the player is trying to collect the ball to go outside the box, Rafa Guerreiro just goes steaming into him on the edge of the box and gives Feyenoord a penalty, which Jimenez duly dispatches to make it 2-0. Now, Justin Bijlo had made some good saves in the final goal before this to kind of keep the score at 1-0. He's rewarded for those saves by Feyenoord doubling the advantage. In the second half, Bayern just camped on the edge of the box, but had no real way of breaking them down. And ultimately, they did end up hitting the bar. There was a couple of big opportunities. Jamal Musiala, a header that he probably should do a little bit better with, if we're being completely honest. But you kind of get to that point and you're thinking, okay, Bayern are struggling here. And from the kind of depths of it all, Feyenoord goes steaming through the middle in the 89th minute and slip the ball into Ueda, who finishes really, really nicely. And De Kuip goes absolutely mad, as you would expect. What a wonderful night for Feyenoord. But Bayern just looked a bit sort of confused, I think, more than anything else. And maybe that's the worry, because Bayern have been a little bit up and down of late, right? Before the Christmas break, we talked about this on the post box, but they lost 2-1 to Mainz, who are a very good side this year and deserve due credit, but it's also a game that you're not necessarily expecting Bayern to lose. You don't really expect Bayern to lose many games. They have a 3-2 against Wolfsburg at the weekend that was a little bit, it felt not quite as comfortable as I'd imagine they would have liked it to, despite the fact that they dominated the ball again in that game. And then in this one, they have all the ball and they get punished for, one, not taking their chances, and two, looking just a bit at sea at the back. And you look at the goals, the 3 goals, all of them have major defensive mishaps in them, where Bayern look all over the place defensively. Admittedly, by the third one, they've taken off a centre-back in Kim and tried to put Pavlovic in there to try and force their way back into the game. So maybe there's a bit more understanding in that regard. But for Vincent Kompany, who was obviously a world-class centre-back in his own day, to not be able to sort this defensive line out. And you know, it's not the first time we've seen this season. It definitely won't be the last. questions remain, I think, over how far along Bayern are in this project. They're obviously better than last season. And look, I think Kompany is going to be a very, very good manager. And I think that they've made a bold decision and that they should stick with it. But equally, I do think that people will look at that and think, hang on, if Vincent Kompany can't be the man to sort out this Bayern backline, who will?
Yeah, totally. I mean, maybe Kim and Upamecano have been made to feel too comfortable in their positions at times at Bayern, and that perhaps is part of it. But I think that it's clear that Bayern themselves don't really feel they are in a good spot right now. Joshua Kimmich's come out after the match, said how basically they can't consider themselves a top team, but the only way they're going to get through this is to stick together and make sure that they don't doubt themselves beyond that. Like, they've obviously got to show a siege mentality here. You're going to go through dips in form as a football team. Like, it's part and parcel of the game. But the only way you get through it is by keeping your resolve and sticking together and making sure you're not turning on each other. And that seems pretty much where Bayern need to be right now.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. You were watching the game at the Emirates where Arsenal won 3-0 against Dinamo Zagreb. How did it go down? And was this as comprehensive as it looked?
Yeah, I mean, not too much to report from it. 3-0, straightforward win, really. But it was an important day, actually, in their season. You look at it and you're like, oh, yeah, they won 3-0. But like, they had to get this game done. They've got a warm weather training camp penciled in to go to in Dubai next month. And in order to be able to go to that, they need to not be involved in the Champions League playoff stage. And it's looking good. It's looking like they can actually go ahead with this trip to Dubai. Obviously, Arsenal suffered an early exit from the FA Cup. And now getting some sun on their backs, getting a bit of togetherness and like coming up with their strategy for the last few months of the season, this might be golden for Arsenal. So this could be actually a really important win, even though, you know, on the face of it, you just look at it and say, okay, routine as expected. I mean, Dinamo did actually put up a reasonable fight to make sure they didn't get run over. And early in the second half, we might have even had a game on our hands. I mean, they were kind of putting up the low block, but threatening to make sure that Arsenal didn't have this all their own way and that they'd get frustrated and some gaps would open up. But in the end, once that second goal came for Arsenal, they were able to just make sure they got it all over the line and it was all good from there. Rice was good, Martinelli was good, Odegaard was good. I guess all you could really say about the performance is, like, can they have a quick turnaround now and do this again to Wolves? Because that's what they need to start doing. Obviously, a disappointing result at the weekend, which they've been able to get out of their system. Havertz has got on the score sheet here, which is important. I mean, I think it's important to know, looking at player-by-player performances, I mean, Nwaneri is such a better player than Raheem Sterling at this point. Like, it's kind of saddened me because it's like Raheem Sterling has had all the natural, you know, like that. Think of when he was like Liverpool going into Man City and like how he just played
the freedom, etc.
The freedom of play. And it's like all of that has now been knocked out of Raheem Sterling and it's gone. And we've got like kind of a shell of a player here who's technically very good, but just can't do any of the stuff that actually made him a superstar in the first place. So that kind of makes me sad. But what makes me happy is that Nwaneri is absolutely fitting into this team very well. And I say, well, I think we've reached the stage where Nwaneri will be above Sterling quite clearly in the pecking order here. And I guess the big issue will be, like, what Arsenal now go and do about the forward? Yes, Havertz has scored, but we haven't really got a convincing front line here. It was revealed across the game that there had been a mural outside the stadium which had Josh Kroenke painted on a wall, and it says, "Time to splash some cash, Josh." So yeah, it's
I thought you were just going to say that people were saying thank you. I was like, Arsenal need to stop painting murals of people. It's really
no.
weird.
Like, they're having a dig at Kroenke. They're like, I think it was Cazorla or something is in there as well. And there's like this big painting outside the Emirates, and it's like a dig at Kroenke. Like, spend some money. Today, there's ongoing rumours about Mateus Cunha. There's ongoing rumours about Benjamin Šeško. Something's going to give, I think, before the deadline. There's a lot of expectation now that Arsenal do go and sign that extra forward. So let's see if by the time they get on that training camp in Dubai, if they've got somebody else in tow.
Yeah, I mean, I got to say, I thought Havertz was excellent. I thought the knockdown for the Declan Rice goal was absolutely glorious centre-forward play. He takes his goal well. Like, this was a really good performance from Kai Havertz. That doesn't necessarily mean he's the answer for all of the things, and Arsenal still should sign a forward. That's not what I'm saying. But equally, I thought he did really, really well here. I thought it was interesting seeing Declan Rice in a more forward-thinking role. Obviously, Jorginho played at the base of the midfield at the pivot, and obviously when Arsenal have this much of the ball, you can do a little bit more in terms of pushing Rice forward, but maybe a little precursor to next season if they do end up signing Zubimendi, of what they can do in these areas, and what Declan Rice can do when he gets further forward, because he scored one. He probably should have had a couple, to be perfectly honest with you, and it was an impressive performance in terms of his ability to get into the box and make things happen. So credit where it's due. Nice for Martin Odegaard to get a goal, and as you say, really nice to see Ethan Nwaneri back on the pitch and back playing football again, because they've missed him in the short period that he's been out, but equally, that shows how important he's become quite quickly to the depth elements of this team. So a good result for Arsenal, a comprehensive win. Dinamo Zagreb, I think they've been a tough nut to crack this season, maybe that Bayern game aside, but looks like they're pretty much done and dusted now. Another team that are done and dusted are RB Salzburg, and they went to the Bernabeu to play Real Madrid and then lost 5-1. Now, Salzburg actually started the game really well. They pressed really high. They tried to create some chances. The Bernabeu crowd, who are famously not that patient, were whistling 3 minutes into the game because they hadn't had very much of the ball. They needn't have worried. Real Madrid played some of the sexiest football I have seen here in a long, long time. It was breathtaking at times, some of these goals. From the moment Rodrigo scores the opener, suddenly Real Madrid just gather this swagger.
Oh, mate, Bellingham's back heel set the tone for that.
Bellingham's back heel for the second Rodrigo goal is sublime, but the finish is absolutely glorious as well. Mbappe then scores a third in a bit of a strange situation where he chases down the goalkeeper and tackles him. But you know what? We've been questioning a little bit, not about Mbappe fitting into this team, but how they were going to work going forward when you need to kind of deal with the work rate. He showed that. And got the goal and the rewards for it. And then Vinicius just like, hang on, I haven't scored yet, and just completely takes over and scores two glorious goals. His 100th and 101st goals for Real Madrid. I think it's 291 games or 290 odd games, 101 goals now for Vinicius Jr. You'd imagine they're not going to be the last either that he scores in the famous white shirt. But I did enjoy how he was like, hang on, Rodrigo scored, Mbappe scored, I better score. And he basically just gets the ball on the left wing, beats like two players and just curls one in. You're like, all right, yeah, you can just do that sometimes. And the second goal is a lovely run, really good from Valverde, like splitting through the middle, drives him in, and he just sends he sends the defender the wrong way with the most unbelievable body feint, and then just slides it past the keeper. Some really, really good stuff, I thought, from Real Madrid. Salzburg have been really poor all season. They score a good goal. Mads Bidstrup, formerly of Brentford, ending up scoring a great finish, actually, really hooked kind of volley finish, and Real Madrid would be a bit disappointed not to keep the clean sheet, but the front three starting to click here, and yes, we need to see it in bigger games than this. Yes, we need to see it against better opposition than this, but all three of them being on the score sheet, I'm sure will delight Carlo Ancelotti.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've only seen the goals from this one, but yeah, they definitely had a swagger about them, and that's what you expect when we get to this time of year. This is when Madrid get that swagger. Talked about how Mbappe had it on the main show. We opened it up by talking about Mbappe and how he played against Las Palmas at the weekend. And if he can continue to play like that, then it's gonna run into the rest of the team too. Because if you've got an informed player like that, then you're going to be feeling good, and you want that infectious feeling to set in. So, yeah, if you're a Madrid fan, it's a time for that optimism to start rising.
Yeah, 100%. Really, really impressive, actually, even against poor opposition in Salzburg. We're having a dreadful time of it across the course of this season. Let's run through the rest of the bits and bobs. Salzburg's RB brothers, Leipzig, ended up with a win. They 6 defeats in a row. They did not make it 7, which means they have not joined Leverkusen as the only German team to lose 7 Champions League games in a row. So that's something they can hang on to. this was much better from Leipzig. Now, obviously, at the weekend, they had a dreadful result against Bochum. They were 3-0 up. They ended up drawing 3-3. They could have lost it. They could have won it. And then in the final moments, they had to do that without Šeško and Openda. Šeško scores the opener here. Lovely, really nice flowing move from Leipzig. And, you see a result like this where they're beating Sporting, who, right, are not the force that they were under Amorim by any chance, but have kind of recovered a little bit of ground in terms of getting back to being the league leaders in Portugal and just kind of rediscovering a little bit of their spark under Rui Borges. But Leipzig tore them apart for this first goal. It's a great cross from Rahm. It's a good finish from Šeško, although to be fair, there's not loads he could do to miss it, but it's a really good team goal. And then they take their foot off the gas a little bit, and Sporting bring Gyökeres off the bench, which was quite weird in the first place, but it is what it is. He goes through one-on-one and equalises. It remains absolutely lethal in front of goal. And you're thinking, are Leipzig going to collapse again in the Champions League? But they don't. Yusuf Poulsen, the old dog, comes on and scores the winner. So Leipzig have, not lost every game in this Champions League group stage. Terrible result for Sporting this, because much as they would have looked at this, early on and when the fixtures were released and thought that's a tricky game away at Leipzig, that's one of the harder games we have to play, considering what's happened since, they would have been looking at this as a real opportunity. And from a team who were so high up in this table before Amorim left, they now find themselves 20th, and there is a chance that they don't end up qualifying for the knockout phases. Now, I think it's a very, very slim chance, and they have Bologna at home. A point would be enough. To be honest, even losing narrowly would almost certainly be enough. But, a point here would have guaranteed them a knockout spot, and just one of those things that rocks the foundations a little bit after everything felt like it had been stabilised a touch. So, yeah, tough result for Sporting, great result for Marco Rosa and Leipzig. Another tough result for Brest. They lost 2-0 to Shakhtar Donetsk in Germany. This was good from Shakhtar, and they've kept themselves alive with 2 wins in their last 2 now. They looked done and dusted. They looked absolutely out of it. It's going to take a lot for them to end up qualifying. It's going to take a goal difference swing that's almost ridiculous to kind of comprehend, but they've given themselves a shot, right? They've given themselves the opportunity to try and do something on that final day. They dominated Brest, and it's been weird because Brest have been really bad domestically, and yet in the Champions League they've been able to raise their game almost everywhere they've gone. You look at that Leverkusen result that they pulled out earlier in the season. It just feels like this was a performance from their domestic season rather than their European one, and they just didn't get going. Shakhtar 2-0, and could and should have been more. Jorge Sudakov scored from the spot for the second. Kevin scored the opener, which is just a great name, and we should all have more players just called Kevin, I think, to be honest. But you look at the way that Shakhtar played, this could have been 3-4, and Brest really didn't have a decent effort on target until a free kick late on in the game that needed to be pushed away. But bad result for them. Look, they're going to qualify. They're going to be in the knockout playoffs, I think, at this point. But considering where they were and considering the fairy tale that looked on at one point, they would have really, really hoped to have won this one, and they've fallen short in that regard. Celtic beat Young Boys 1-0. Now, DJ, how Celtic didn't win this about 8-0.
Yeah, I've heard about this. I haven't seen it, but I've read some funny stuff about it.
3 goals disallowed in the first half. Arne Ingels misses a penalty, which is kind of unheard of. He doesn't miss penalties. When Celtic did win it, it might be the worst goal you've ever seen. Ever seen. It's a brilliant ball through. Should be given due credit for Adam Eder. But he just fluffs his lines, one-on-one with the keeper. He pokes it at the keeper. It bounces off the keeper's arm. It bounces into the centre-back who's steaming back to try and counter it, who falls over his legs at the same time and just watches the ball dribble into the back of the net. It's just one of those. But the relief that flooded around Celtic Park when this went in, because this guaranteed Celtic a knockout spot, qualification to those playoffs guaranteed. It's a big deal. Now. Huge deal for Celtic. And I got to say, I was watching the pre-match build-up from this game. The place was absolutely bouncing before kickoff. The You'll Never Walk Alone was as loud as I've heard it. You could barely hear the Champions League anthem over the roar of the crowd. It was incredible. And absolutely as loud as you'll hear anything this week, although it did get nervy towards the end of it. And as I say, that relief when the goal went in just flooded around the place. Now, they made it a little bit more difficult than it needed to be in the final stages because Dyson Maida was sent off. It was a weird red card. He kicks out, it's almost like, and he kicks out and he basically catches the opposition player high. But it's almost like he's falling backwards. It's almost as if he doesn't realize he's falling backwards. And he's trying to like loop his leg round to try and kick the ball out. And instead he just like absolutely leathers his opposite number in the shin. Like it's a red card. I'm not complaining about it or saying that it's a wrong decision. But it's almost like, one, it's quite out of character. Sneijder seems like a very nice man. And two, it's just like one of those strange ones where like it's almost as if he doesn't realize what's going on. Doesn't realize that his body has moved positions from where he was a second ago. And so sticking your leg out to hook the ball away is basically now just like taking your leg around and whacking someone in the knee. It's absolutely bizarre. But yeah, job done from Celtic. Not as easy as perhaps it should have been, but a night where there was a lot of stress at Celtic Park and a lot of jubilation at the full-time whistle as well.
Yeah, and they'll all be becoming Man United fans, I imagine, on Thursday, and they'll be just as loud if Rangers lose.
Oh yeah, I imagine that won't be quiet, but there's lots to get through there. Just to finish on Wednesday's action with the two Milan teams, Inter won 1-0 against Sparta Prague. Really quiet night for Inter. Opener from Lautaro with a really lovely strike, a volley at the near post, but not much else went down after this. Inter in complete control, which remains impressive in itself in this competition, and especially away at Sparta, who have caused some problems to teams as well. 6 clean sheets from 7. They have conceded 1 goal in the Champions League groups or league stages. If you're writing off this Inter side because results like this don't necessarily set the world on fire, you're a madman. So another good result for Inter. They look pretty good now for being a top 8 side. And so do Milan, who won 1-0 against Girona. It wasn't vintage from them either at San Siro, but they got it done, climbed back into the top 8. Rafael Leao with the only goal. It is a gorgeous goal. A dazzling strike.
Such a good goal. Like, I love this goal.
The way he shimmies back outside the defender and then roofs the ball, like absolutely hits the top of the net with it, is sublime. He's one of those
Carragher
players
shouted "chop chop bang" on CBS. I'm not always the biggest fan of the CBS lot, but it did make me laugh.
Chop chop bang is a very, very good way of describing it. Just kind of from other perspectives on Milan, it was nice to see Christian Pulisic make his return from injury off the bench. Milan are so much better when he's fit and firing. They needed him in those Supercoppa games, and he delivered. He hasn't really played since then. It's a recurring injury that he picked up originally back on international duty, but they're just so much better when he's about. So as he works his way back into the side, I think Milan are going to get stronger under Conceição. From a Girona perspective, they're absolutely toothless. They made almost nothing happen here, and I have loads and loads of sympathy for them. When you lose that many players, when you lose that many key players after such a good year last year, it's always going to be really, really difficult. But wow, that almost nothing in front of goal, really frustrating. I imagine if you're a Girona fan, you get this opportunity to go and play in the Champions League, and it's just been pretty disappointing, pretty disheartening for the entire campaign. But a really good result from Milan still.
Yeah, I sometimes think you should be able to use your team from last year. Like, it's not really fair because this isn't the team that got there.
You should be able to like defer. You'd be like, can we be in the Europa League?
Yeah, it's like, hang on, this isn't fair anymore. We haven't got the same lads.
Imagine if you're just like, you could do like a swappy. You just go to someone in the Europa League and be like, hey mate, do you want to swap?
Yeah.
You want to play in the Champions League?
We're not really
play in the Europa League.
Like, it happens at 5-a-side. I don't see why it can't happen here.
Like, if you just went to Manchester United at the start of the season and were like, do you want to play in the Champions League? We'll play in the Europa League. They would have definitely said yes. They probably would have been in exactly the same position, but it is kind of what it is. Right, that's Wednesday wrapped up. We'll get on to Tuesday's action after the break. Don't go anywhere.
We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
If you're a facilities manager at a university, you know students rely on the cafeteria for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and the occasional late-night snack. So when a dishwasher breaks down and dirty plates pile up, the mess hall can turn messy in the blink of an eye. Enter Grainger. With over 1 million industrial-grade products and fast delivery, the product you need now is never far away. So you can turn that dishwasher back into a lean, clean washing machine. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Welcome back to Ranks FC, and now we'll go through Tuesday's action, Jack. There is no doubt where we're starting here. I mean, people were probably amazed we didn't open the show and just talk about this for an hour, because we definitely could have done. But let's do it. Let's talk about Barcelona.
I've firstly got to apologise to you, because when we split these games up, obviously at the start of the day, you often text me like, what do you want me to watch? What do you want to watch? And I basically said, well, do you want to pick your Wednesday games? And you said, yeah, I want to watch the PSG game against Manchester City, and I think it's quite easy for me to watch the Arsenal game. And I went, fine, no worries. I tell you what, you also watched the Liverpool game on Tuesday, and I'll deal with Benfica, Barcelona, and Atleti Bayer Leverkusen. They're the two that I really want to get stuck into. You were like, yeah, no worries. I'm sorry, mate. I feel like I've robbed you.
Well, you didn't actually. You know what happened? Live. I can tell you what happened here is that I managed to avoid the score in both games until later on, and watched extended highlights without knowing. I knew something mad had gone in the Barcelona game, but because of alerts that were popping up, I'm quickly swiping. I didn't see the score. I didn't know exactly. And then I quickly turned my alerts off. So I knew something weird had gone on. But later on, I'm talking like a couple of hours after it had finished, I actually got round to sitting and watching like 15 minutes highlights. So I did kind of have the same experience of you watching this live. Dylan had got home from school, and I was like, we're going to sit down and you're going to watch Barcelona with me, because I think we're about to see something special. And it was really cool.
There you go. Well, I'm glad I didn't ruin it for you in that regard. Benfica 4, Barcelona 5. Perhaps the most madcap game that we've seen in this Champions League season, in the driving rain in Lisbon, as Barcelona completed a pretty remarkable remontada to score 3 times in the last 12 minutes and added time, turning what looked like a certain loss into the most unlikely of wins. I mean, Dean, look, there are issues with this Barcelona side, especially from a defensive perspective. Oh, yes. Let's not make any bones about that. But my God, in these youthful ranks, they have some spirit. And sometimes that's the difference in a game like this. I was looking at this Barcelona starting 11, right? And you kind of, in terms of when you're talking about a footballer's peak, right? What do we generally say is that sort of era between 25 and 29 is probably where you'd put most footballers in terms of in their peak years. You look at this Barcelona starting 11 and you're a bit like, okay, there's a couple of veterans in the ranks.
Let's say it's anyone 25 to 29.
One in goal in Wojciech Szczesny, we'll come on to him, and one in Robert Lewandowski, who's up top. There are 2 players, and maybe you'd stretch to 3, who are in that peak period. Rafinha, 28 years old, right in the heart of his peak. Yeah. Jules Koundé, 25. Ronald Araujo, 24. So 3 of this team. In there, you've got teenagers in the form of Lamine Yamal, in the form of Gavi, in the form Alejandro Balde's 21 now. You've got Casado, who's made his breakthrough this year. You've got Pedri, who feels like a veteran, but isn't, and is still incredibly young. You're kind of looking at it going, okay, surely they've got more on the bench. Nope, Fermin Lopez comes on, Gerard Martin comes on. Yes, okay, Ferran, Frankie de Jong, Eric Garcia a little bit further on in their careers. But it feels like this Barcelona side have nobody in their peak years. And I think that comes through sometimes. I think it comes through in both positive and negative ways. One, they're a bit mad and they're a bit madcap and they don't win games you expect them to. They commit silly errors you don't expect them to. Fine. All of those things are okay. But equally, the fearlessness of youth, the fact that they were 4-2 down with 12 minutes to play and they were like, yeah, I'll probably win this, is just absolutely absurd in so many different ways. And then they go and make it happen. So I do think it's interesting that you look at this side and you think, well, so many of them are La Masia graduates. So many of these players have dreamed of playing for Barcelona for long periods of their careers. And you're seeing that week in, week out, I think, in terms of the spirit around this. Not always in the results, not always in the performances, but in terms of what they give and what they continue to give on the pitch every time.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit Real Madrid, really, isn't it? In terms of winning games that you think are dead in the Champions League. So, like, that's good to see that they have got that spirit about them, because obviously they've drifted away a little bit in La Liga, and there has to be a bit of concern about the mental capacity to compete for big titles when you've got a team that's still so young and your biggest players, as you say, in goal and up top are so old. Szczesny, as you say, definitely a concern. But yeah, I think when the fourth goal goes in for Benfica, I was confused actually watching the extended. I was like, well, this should be done. So what I'm then thinking is
what are these next 7 minutes on the highlights?
I know that there's a late twist. So Dylan was like, what do you think happens? I was like, mate, I think Barcelona win this game 5-4. I was like, that must be what happens. And he's like, no way. And he's like, doing the kid thing, like over-exaggerating. He's like standing in the middle of the lounge with his head in his hands, like in anticipation. And then he's like, by the end, he's pretending he's Rafinha or whatever he's doing. But it was just wild. And I think the weather actually makes this game even better. It plays into it massively. And the scenes of it, like even all the celebratory pictures of Rafinha and knee slides, and just it's like a scene from a movie. It really is. But just a game for the ages. And if you're listening to this now and you actually haven't seen this, like, you have to go and see it. It's a game that you just have to have seen to understand what actually went on. Nothing we can say can
out in cinemas for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, honestly, it should now be on in cinemas. It should be like, if you like football, you have to watch what happened in this game, because it's proof that no game's ever dead.
Yeah. I mean, it was remarkable in almost every way.
It should have been dead.
You know what you're saying? Like it's one of those. And whilst Dylan wasn't the only person standing in the middle of his front room with his head in his hands, because that's what I was doing while I was watching the end of this game. I was like, no way, just can't.
Because you have your school uniform on as well.
I also had my uniform on. Yeah, it was nuts. I had my little shorts and my tie. But still, you're just looking at it and thinking, this is like bizarre, like no way. And also, like, Lucy was watching the first bit with me, and when Benfica scored the fourth one, she was like, I'm going to go to bed now. And when Barcelona scored, I went down and got her out of bed and was like, come back up, you need to watch this. So like, that's kind of the feeling that I had around it. Look, I've got to say this, and I don't want to take anything away from Barcelona, but I do feel a bit for Benfica here on a couple of decisions. The two Barcelona penalties are both quite soft. I think they're both justifiable, but I don't think there's any more in either of those challenges than there is on Benfica's late claim for a penalty, which comes before the Barcelona winner from Rafinha, right? Like, there's a call. They're all going mental about this. And meanwhile, Rafinha's down the other end, like screaming away to go and score. It was quite weird tactically that they decided to just throw everyone forward at that point and almost kind of go for it and leave Rafinha just stood on his own on the halfway line, ready to break if it happened. It's a great ball from Ferran Torres, actually, and he deserves credit because he often goes under the radar, Ferran, and it's a lovely ball out to Rafinha to set him away for the winner. Also, you have to feel a bit for Pavlidis. He's not set the world on fire at Benfica, but you score a first half hat-trick against Barcelona in the Champions League, and that feels like it could be your launch pad. And now that match
you
ball
barely
means
get a mention.
Absolutely nothing, right? I thought it was interesting that Bruno Lage made them stand in the rain on the pitch to dress them down after the game. It was a little bit Phil Brown. I don't know if that's a reference that's going to land with everyone. Look up Phil Brown Team Talk. He was the Hull manager once, and he sat his entire team down on the pitch at half time and basically did the dressing room talk on the pitch. This felt a bit like that from Bruno Lage in front of the entire crowd. He is just absolutely like screaming.
He's probably in the right to do that as well, just so the fans know that like this isn't okay. I know we're talking about like one of the most entertaining games of all time, but from the Benfica perspective, this is like genuinely not okay.
Yeah. I think it's just one of those things that you've got to look at. Look, before we move on, we probably do need to talk about the goalkeepers and the madness that went down here at both ends. So just to kind of put it into context, Wojciech Szczesny, for the second Benfica goal, comes steaming out of his box. Instead of clearing the ball, goes straight through Alejandro Balde, and the ball is just left to Pavlidis to score a second. And then for the third Benfica goal, he gives away the penalty. Now, I was talking to Tony Meola today on Sirius, who's a former USMNT goalkeeper, of course, and he basically was like, I feel a bit for Szczesny because he's never been asked to do that for his entire career. He has never been asked to be a sweeper keeper. Juventus had one of the lowest blocks that had going. They used to defend on their own 6-yard box. He was barely asked to leave the 6-yard box, never mind the 18-yard box. And instead now he's been asked to leg it out of the goal and sweep up. 6 months ago, this man was lying on a beach in Marbella, right? Having it off, enjoying retirement. And now he's back here getting trussed up in the Champions League. In his defense, he makes an absolutely unbelievable save at 4-4. To keep Barcelona in this. And he deserves due credit for that because the only thing you can do is try and make up for it. And he did that. Imagine if they'd pulled it back to 4-4 and then conceded again. It would have been a death stroke for Barcelona. So big moment for him. And I feel even more for Anatoly Trubin, who had a brilliant first half, was absolutely excellent for Benfica and saw the freakiest goal in the world. He wouldn't be able to do this if he tried it 100 times. Rafinha is stood about 25 yards away from him. And he cannons a clearance into Rafinha's head that hits him at the exact perfect angle that means it loops all the way back into the side netting to keep it absolutely not getting anywhere near that. Even if he's in the goal, I think that one might go in. You couldn't do that in a million years if you tried. And it's just a complete and utter freak accident.
It is, yeah. It was funny. Dylan again was shouting out, I've seen something like that on YouTube before. And that's exactly it. It's the type of thing that you see on some nonsense YouTube compilation in like Sunday League or something. Like you don't see it at this level. And it's extremely unfortunate or fortunate if you're Rafinha because it's literally hit him square on the head. Like kind of looks like a good header because he actually heads it with the right part. But he knows very, very little, if anything, about that. But yeah, just was another layer to the chaos of the game.
Yeah, 100%. Right, we should probably park that one there as much as we could talk about it for hours. What happened when Liverpool beat Lille to guarantee their spot in the last 16?
Well, nothing like that. They maintained their 100% record in the Champions League, so that's something. And Lille did have 10 men for like the last half hour, though, so don't think too much.
Well, they scored with 10 men. They equalised with 10 men.
Yeah, and they actually did quite well. You know, they were restricted to that one shot a goal, and they cancelled each other out a lot. Liverpool finding a couple of moments through Salah and Elliott that kind of decide it. Salah gets his 50th European goal for Liverpool, so he continues to set records. Obviously, he's already like their leading goal scorer, but like that's a milestone in itself. I thought Lille did have a decent go at the game, and their game plan was decent. But overall, I was like, I'm not sure what I really have learned about this game or this team. But so as I thought today, I was like, what's going to happen now? Like Liverpool they're going to win the Champions League group stage. They're going to be the first team that's ever won this. They're top of the Premier League. They're in a cup semi-final. They're still in the FA Cup. I was like, oh, we're getting to the stage where we talk about a quadruple. That's where we're getting to. And that is actually, I was like, let me just search this on X. And I was like, oh yeah, people are starting to talk about the Q word. So yeah, they've got the Carabao Cup semi-final second leg coming up, which isn't in their control at the moment. But I would say that given the unstoppable nature of them at the moment at Anfield, they'll probably be all right there. Now, I've spoken pretty openly about my thoughts on whether this team are really that good, but I'm not going to do that today. I'm actually going to use this to say that there's not really any evidence of anyone else being any better than them. And that's what I have to keep
I would actually
remembering.
argue there's zero evidence.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's what I have to keep remembering. You can only compare them to the rest of the field that they are putting themselves up against. And I think that, part of the reason that competition isn't as fierce this year is because so many teams are being so heavily hit by injuries, and so many teams are feeling so leggy and struggling in the late stages of games. I spoke to someone about this the other day. I was like, what is going on in football at the moment? Like, it's so strange, like the outcomes of games. He said, do you know what? One of the things I'm hearing from players is like, one of the reasons they think they're feeling so leggy is because games are now so long, because there is so much added time at the end of both halves that it's actually really starting to catch up on the amount of minutes they're playing across a season, because it's not 90 minutes, 90 minutes, 90 minutes. It's like 115 minutes and stuff like that, like 100 minutes, 105 minutes, whatever. But like, it's not 90 minutes anymore. I was like, okay, that's a fair point. Now think about like quadruples and how difficult they are. In 2022, people spoke about a potential quadruple for Liverpool, but the difference is that you were then up against like versions of Man City and versions of Real Madrid that were like actually really good. And both of those teams are significantly weaker now and actually aren't as good as Liverpool. So I don't think they'll win the quadruple, but I actually can see why people would start to look at it as realistic. And that even if they fall short of that, then a treble is definitely on the cards. To go and win the Carabao. Who knows about the FA Cup? Obviously, there's a load of draws to be made before we get further down the road. We're only in the fourth round, but so that's up in the air. But the Premier League is theirs if they want it, and the Champions League, they have to be favourites. Arne Slot's taking no prisoners at Anfield at the moment, so they'll go and beat Ipswich at the weekend comfortably. You would expect. Then they'll dispatch Spurs probably in a couple of weeks' time to send themselves through to Wembley and give Ange another rocky moment. So yeah, Jack, the main thing I'm taking away from it actually is that I'm going to take this chance to praise Liverpool because I haven't done it enough. And it was no easy task to take over from Jurgen Klopp to go and do this. And well done.
Yeah, Arne Slot doing a lovely job. I'm with you in that I don't think they'll win the quadruple, but I would imagine that more than one trophy is probably on its way to Anfield. I
just think that Q word is going to come up more and more now. I think that this will be the beginning of that debate. If we always get it.
But it's kind of like, can they win it? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, they can. They could. Like, will they? I still think it's probably not at this point. We kind of have to look at that and explore it as it comes along. But, so far so good, I think, from a Liverpool perspective. And that's all you can really ask for. I think that the Champions League feels really, really open this season. I feel like there's like 8-9 teams that will fancy their chances of going all the way at this point. And that's a pretty cool place for everyone to be, I think, in the Champions League. So we'll see. And maybe that's just the quality across Europe being slightly less polarized. But equally, you kind of look at it and think that's got to be a good thing for the competition. That another team, or maybe two teams, that will feel like they can go and win it. Atletico Madrid by Leverkusen, two of Europe's form teams coming into this one. Atleti 2, Leverkusen 1. As entertaining as the thriller in Lisbon was, this was equal to it, but in such a different way. It was the dark arts in full flow. It was pure cholismo. And Atleti were like dogs of war in this game. Pablo Barrios is sent off early in the game for a wild challenge. I don't think it's malicious, and I think he's trying to play the ball, but he catches him high, and in slow motion, it looks absolutely dreadful. So no qualms with the red card, although I don't think he's trying to hurt his opponent. From that moment, Leverkusen sees even more control than they had before, and they get their just rewards a moment before half-time. Hincapié goes in, heads home the opener, and you're thinking, okay, Leverkusen have had the very much the better of this first half. They're now up a man. And in any other game, against any other opposition, you're going, how many do they win by? Not against Atleti. Right, they dug into the well again. There's so many times we've seen them do this. They find a way. They're down a man. They're down a goal. They fight tooth and nail for every ball. And as much as you can correctly talk about them being more expansive this season, playing more open football, scoring more goals, deep down, they still maintain that old adage. And they are the hardest team in world football to kill off. They're almost impossible to kill. They're like a cockroach when they go into this kind of mode. And look, I think we should praise Simeone for being able to expand his palette a little bit more at this point. He's got the players now to play slightly differently. It's why Atleti look really good most of the time. But when they are asked to do something like this, you can tell there's still an element of relish amongst these players being like, let's get stuck into this. And you look at the players that they've brought in, right? Julian Alvarez sacrificed himself in many ways in order to allow Argentina to go and win the World Cup. So did Rodrigo de Paul, right? Basically turned into a bodyguard for the entire of that World Cup campaign. You look at Conor Gallagher, whose technical abilities had question marks over it. No one ever questioned the fact that he covered every blade of grass, right? You look at the players that are brought in, you're like, they fit. They fit. Not only are they good technically and able to expand this side, but every single one of them is happy to work like a dog when they have to. And the 2 goals they score, one of them is Griezmann's brilliant ball over the top that Alvarez does wonderfully to control, bring down and score a brilliant first-time finish. And then Atleti force it. They bring out the hysterics. They bring out the dark arts. They force it down to 10 versus 10. And that is the moment you're like, they're just better at this than everyone else. They're better than everyone else. They wind everybody up. They frustrate. They play act. When they need to, they're willing to go into all of those things in order to give themselves the best opportunity to win. And it's not always pretty, and people hate it. Joe Cole on TNT Sports was absolutely hating it from the moment. He was like, I don't understand why they keep falling over and rolling around. I'm like, because it's winding Leverkusen up the same way it's winding you up, Joe. Yeah. But the Leverkusen players are getting more and more maddened by the fact that these decisions are going against them. And eventually Nkapie cracks, right? He scores the goal in the first half. In the second half, he takes a stupid yellow card and he ends up making it 10v10 with the game at 1-1. And you know who's going to go on and win it from there. And it's it's a mistake from Granit Xhaka, but it's a brilliant finish from Julian Alvarez as well. And it's just one of those things that you're thinking, are you ruling Atleti out of winning this whole thing? Because I am absolutely not with this ability to just withstand almost anything in a game.
Yeah, look, they're one of the hardest teams to kill off, and Julian Alvarez is one of the hardest players it seems to replace. I mean, what Man City would have done this season for a player like this? I mean, it was crazy that they didn't replace him in the first place, but now that they're realising it by getting Marmoush through the door, and then you're watching Alvarez in games like this, and he's loving it. I think he's really bouncing off the energy of that place too. Like, of all the new stadiums particular are really hard to generate proper atmospheres in, but this place is a proper cauldron. Like, they do not mess around. I reckon if I was to start football all over again and pick new teams to support, I think Atleti would be right up there with a team that would suit what I want in a football club. I love winding people up, and I think I'd be bang up for this. And I love the passion of that. Like, when they scored that second goal, the place went absolutely mental. And like, that is what football is all about. Alvarez is loving it. Like, there's no regrets from him at all over like this switch that he's made. And I think he feels more part of it. Like at Man City, there's so many superstars and there's so much money about, and it's such a different team build and team ethic. And I just think that like he's absolutely loving life in this team.
Yeah, 100%. Just one last thing before we move on off this game. Xabi Alonso, obviously a wonderful young manager, probably the best in the business in terms of what we've seen from him so far as a young coach. There's zero doubt about that whatsoever. But it is interesting, you look at a couple of games, he struggled to keep a lid on. He said afterwards that this ended up far messier than it needed to be, and he's absolutely right? You look at this, you look at when his Leverkusen side were knocked out of the Europa League 2 seasons ago by a very, very wily Mourinho Roma side. It's not the first time we've seen his team sort of crack up under the pressure of, look, that wasn't as good a Leverkusen side as this is, but equally, that was another game where Roma dragged Leverkusen kicking and screaming down to their level. They dragged them into a knife fight, and Leverkusen didn't want it. And Atleti did that here. They dragged them into a knife fight, and they didn't want it. It's a string that Alonso needs to add to his bow as he gets more experience. It's not necessarily a big problem right at this point of his managerial career, but equally, you have to learn how to deal with these, how to rise above it, or how to actually get down and dirty in these kind of games and give as good as you get. And right now, Leverkusen sort of felt like they were a bit stuck between stations in that regard. So just something to keep an eye on. They don't look as good when teams do try and drag them down to basically making it a throwing mud game. And that's exactly what this was.
Yeah, that's true. They've been kind of brought back down to earth a couple of times this season. I mean, they kind of did this to Inter Milan actually themselves. Like there was that game in the Champions League not so long ago when they got the 1-0 win over Inter. But obviously they were humbled at Anfield not too long before that too. So they're learning lessons along the way here, and it's all part of it. You know, they're pretty new to being at this very top level, and I think that players and manager will be learning from that.
Yeah, 100%. Right, before we get into the roundup, do you want to quickly talk about Aston Villa's loss to Monaco?
Yeah, quickly, I will. An opportunity probably missed here for Aston Villa, who put in a leggy performance, really.
They've got away with it a little bit here.
They have got away with it. Like now, in hindsight, it's actually going to be probably okay. They're ninth. Yeah, I was just going to check where they are, but they're just outside those automatic spots, but on the same points as Leverkusen, who are eighth. It was a performance actually that we've seen quite a few times this season from Aston Villa, where they make too many mistakes. I think they were possibly feeling the grind of that 2-2 draw against Arsenal, which they did really well to get back into, but they definitely could have lost this game by more. Now,
they did create quite a lot of chances. I will give them some credit in that they created quite a lot in this game. It just felt like they didn't have the kind of wherewithal, and maybe that is legginess, as you say, to actually get on. Equally, you're right, in that they could have conceded more as well. But Unai Emery said afterwards he was pleased with the chances created, but you've got to take those chances. And I thought that was a pretty much spot-on estimation of where the game was.
Well, he also really dug out a few people after this game. And one thing he particularly wasn't happy about was his decision to play John Duran and Watkins as a partnership. He said in hindsight that it was something that didn't work. He said, I made a mistake when I decided to play with two strikers because in that moment we were more or less controlling the game. And we wonder all the time about, why doesn't he play these two together? Like, it's a really difficult decision to choose which one to play and when. And obviously Duran often, when he does come off the bench, does score. But this is why he doesn't play them together. He's kind of reminded himself that it doesn't work and it actually plays into the hands of the opposition to go and do it. Now, obviously, if you'd have offered Aston Villa to be in this position at the start of the Champions League campaign, they would have grabbed it with both hands. But I did find it interesting that Emery was quite so critical about his team afterwards, because he also dug out, that their set pieces were horrible. Villa did waste a couple of good chances to get this game done. And let's face it, like Monaco are a decent team, but they're not world beaters. And yeah, I was just surprised though that he dug people out, because I don't think he's really somebody that overreacts emotionally to defeats. I think that the experience that he's got, particularly on the European stage, means that he's usually quite level-headed, and he was more scathing of his players than I perhaps expected, even though it obviously wasn't a good night for them. But they're learning too, and Champions League football is extremely difficult, especially in this format. And I think it's important to remember in a season when they've beaten the likes of Bayern Munich that they don't forget how good they have been capable of being on this stage. Is it Celtic next for them, I think?
Yeah, Celtic at Villa Park.
Yeah, so that's a really big game, and that's going to be the atmosphere will be unbelievable in that stadium. But
it's quite interesting now because Villa have it all to play for in terms of qualifying for the top 8. Celtic have that freedom now where they've qualified and will be able to just go out and give it a go. I think that might be a cracker.
Yeah, it should be a really good game. But Celtic got a chance there to rattle them as well. So we'll see. Emery really doesn't want to be in the playoffs because he's talked before about how he wants to ease fixture congestion.
Or weather camp in Dubai.
Exactly, yeah. And obviously, like these playoffs, for those that don't know, the draw for it will be at January the 31st, I think, is the playoff draw.
Yeah.
And then the playoffs take place across 2 dates in middle of February, basically.
It is quite funny, though, that there's a draw and there's only 2 teams that everyone can get. Like, it doesn't really make any sense.
At least it shouldn't take too long, hopefully.
Yeah, well, fingers crossed it won't take that long. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. Right, let's quickly wrap up the rest of the action. Bologna won 2-1 against Borussia Dortmund. Nuri Sahin gone off the back of this result. I'm not going to go too much
Harsh.
into Borussia Dortmund. No, not harsh. Completely correct. I'm not going to go too much into this because we've got a full episode on Borussia Dortmund coming out on Friday morning here on Ranks FC on The Truth, where Dougie and Sam and I took a look through exactly where everything has gone wrong for Borussia Dortmund this season. So look out for that one for more on Borussia Dortmund. They did take the lead through sort of a mad Panenka penalty from Girassi, which he nearly missed. The keeper nearly stood up and saved it, but it sort of just dropped in, which felt like a really bold move considering the form that Dortmund have been in of late. But weirdly, they just sort of gave up after Bologna took the lead. Borussia Dortmund were the better side in the first half. They maybe should have extended it. After the break, Bologna regrouped and they scored 2 goals in 2 minutes. One from Thijs de Linge, who was brought in to replace Joshua Zirkzee. Hasn't set the world on fire, but I do really like Thijs de Linge. And then the second from Samuel Eiling Jr., who's on loan from Aston Villa after moving there from Juventus in the summer. It should have been 3 or 4 after that. Jens Odgaard missed a couple of absolute sitters. Dortmund just gave in, like they collapsed mentally. It was a really, really strange display at the end of this game. I got to give some love for the Bologna fans, mostly. They dressed up. You know, sometimes people lift up the placards and, you know, it shows all the colours of the club. Nope. They all dressed in the blue and red and white of Bologna. The stadium looked absolutely incredible. It's an amazing place to watch football, the Dallara. Amazing city, Bologna. If you're looking for somewhere to visit, could not recommend it more. But like the place looked amazing. The fans loved it. Italiano wins his first Champions League game. Bologna hadn't won this season, despite the fact that they got a relatively soft draw. And Borussia Dortmund at home was their sort of glamour fixture in many ways. And they got their reward for it. They're already out, but a big win and one that will live long in the memory. And the fans who have been brilliant throughout this entire campaign got the win that they deserve to see, I think. So shouts out to the Bologna fans and a display here that was very, very impressive in the second half. PSV won 3-2 against Feyenoord Zvezda. Double for Luke de Jong. He scored a brilliant header. The first one is he hangs in the air for so long and directs it right back across goal. It's a phenomenal header from the old fella. It was a really weird game. It was like in the snow in Belgrade. And after it's 1-0 to PSV, Noah Lang goes over to take a corner. And he's being pelted with snowballs by the Red Star fans while he's trying to take this corner. Anyway, eventually he whips it in and PSV score from the corner. It comes out to De Jong and he hooks in. And Noah Lang just turns around and gives it big beans to the people that throwing snowballs at him. I thought it was really, really enjoyable. I've rewound it like 3 or 4 times on my tape to be like that. It's very, very good. Very much enjoyable. And then they scored third through Ryan Flamingo. Great name. Someone was talking about last summer as someone potentially that the team should be having a look at. Made the move to PSV and he scores a brilliant goal here. He's later sent off for a second yellow, which is really, really harsh. But it's a brilliant strike. If you haven't seen this from Flamingo, on the turn, he cracks a volley in. It's a really, really good strike for a player who can play centre-back or centre-defensive midfield, but has played a lot of centre-back this season. Really, really good strike. Fair play to Red Star. They made a game of it. They when they went, they got 2 back, got a player extra. They got 2 back, but not enough, and they're out. But yeah, PSV getting it done without Malik Tillman, without Serginho Dest, very little from Ricardo Pepi, although Richie Ledesma did play at right whack from a USMNT perspective. So yeah, shouts out to PSV, who are pretty comfortable now at this point. Atalanta won 5-0 against Sturm Graz. 5 different scorers in the 5 goals for Atalanta. They're flying this competition. Sturm Graz are really poor, man. And look, a couple of weeks ago, or a couple of episodes of this show ago, we talked about the fact that Mika Biereth, who formerly of Fulham and Arsenal, was playing really well up front for Sturm Graz. They've sold him to Monaco. We did say that he was going to potentially get a big move. He's gone off to Monaco. They're even worse now. Sturm Graz, they weren't great to begin with. They are worse now. But look, Atalanta will fancy that they can outgun almost anybody at this point. And if they have dropped out of the Serie A title race, which is up for you to decide, but I think it's a long way back now, they might fancy this Europa League, Champions League back-to-back. The last team to do this were Jose Mourinho's Porto.
Oh, okay.
So I'm just looking at them and thinking, they won't fear anybody. Like, it's one thing beating Sturm Graz, and you've got to take that with a pinch of salt, but I do think that their performances across the course of this season suggest that they can be a force against anybody over short distances. I mean, they might not have the legs to go the whole way for the Scudetto, but I don't think there's loads of teams in Europe who could withstand this Atalanta attack.
No, I think that's totally fair. I mean, a full flow, yeah, they're a sight to behold. And it's been talked about plenty of times how they kind of raised the bar for what you're capable of achieving without like household names, if you like. And obviously, like names that have become household names, but they weren't in the first place when they were all put together. So, very interesting that they can be this dynamic.
Yeah, 100%. And just to round it off, Slovan Bratislava lost again. They lost 3-1 to Stuttgart. Jamie Leveling. I'm not going to call him the truth, but he's really, really good. He scored Stuttgart's opening goal here and the second one given after a VAR check. Look, after a tough start to this season, because obviously the highs of last year were great, Stuttgart have built up a bit of a head of steam. They play PSG in a crunch game in Germany on the final day. That one looks really, really exciting. The two of them both in that bottom kind of element of the playoff bracket right now. And that's going to be a bit of a gun fest, I think. It's going to be one of those games where two teams are going to go out and just go for it. So I'm excited to see how they get on there. But they've clawed their way back into not necessarily Bundesliga contention, but Champions League contention in the Bundesliga. They fought their way back. They played really well in the opening game of the Champions League against Real Madrid, but they ended up with nothing. And they had a few games like that in this competition. But I do think that they're a good side, and it's going to be very interesting to see how they line up in that PSG game and how things go. So, shouts out to Stuttgart. The way they killed this game off after Slovan pulled one back was really impressive. They just stood on their neck and went, nope, you are not coming back into this game. We are finishing this off. Got the job done. And then finally, Club Brugge 0, Juventus 0. Are you surprised? I'm not surprised. A word for poor old Archie Rintat, who was doing the commentary live from the game on TNT broadcast, a friend of mine who had to report back to the studio, and they kept going to him and he kept being like, there's nothing to report, like nothing is happening. He told us some things about the crowd, he told us some interesting things that are going on. Archie's brilliant at that kind of thing, but like they kept being like, anything going on in the game? He was like, please don't ask, like there is nothing to tell you. I've got nothing to tell you. One shot on target in this game. Well, that was a good one in the second half from Juventus. And Juve's social media team posted after that they'd qualified. Now, that is now true, but I'm not sure it was at the point where they posted it. So I think they've avoided a boo-boo. I mean, I think it was like 99% sure, but still, weirder things have happened in football. I thought it was disappointing from Juve after their best performance of the season at the weekend against Milan, but they got enough done to ensure qualification. They're still not that exciting. They still have to work out what's going on in this final third. They still need someone to put the ball in the back of the net, but some minor positives in that Chico Conceição came back from injury off the bench, and he's a crucial part of how this team operates.
Yeah, good. Reminds me of once, I think England played against Algeria, and it was like a 0-0. Like a bird landed on the...
It was in the World Cup.
Yeah, and I remember like I had to do like a minute, like the highlights from the game, and like I just like managed to find this picture of a bird that landed on the crossbar at a certain point of the game, and I wrote like 200 words about the bird. It was like, sometimes football is just not that good. Sometimes you don't get a Benfica Barcelona. Sometimes you get the other end of it. You just got to take it when it happens and look for other things that have gone on.
Yeah, I mean that's the famous 2010 World Cup thing, right? The headline was easy: England, Algeria, Slovenia, Yanks, and then England didn't qualify out of the group.
Yeah, I think go brilliantly that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, don't count your chickens before they've hatched. It's just such a. I think they called it the group of joy rather than the group of death.
I mean, even when you tell me now who we played against, I'm like, we've got through that. 7 points.
Yeah. Just absolutely bizarre in so many ways, alas. Right, I think that's probably all from us today on Champions League Takeaway. So all that's left for me to do, say thank you very much to Mr. Dean Jones.
Cheers, mate.
I've been Jack Collins. This has been Ranks FC. Make sure you tune in on Friday for The Truth with Doogie and Sam, where we're going to be talking about Borussia Dortmund and where it's all gone wrong for them this season, trying to work out if there can be any fixes to this Borussia Dortmund side. So one you'll want to get stuck into there. But from us, thank you so much for listening. We'll see you very shortly. Take it easy, Rank Squad. Peace.
We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
If you're a facilities manager at a university, you know students rely on the cafeteria for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and the occasional late-night snack. So when a dishwasher breaks down and dirty plates pile up, the mess hall can turn messy in the blink of an eye. Enter Grainger. With over 1 million industrial-grade products and fast delivery, the product you need now is never far away. So you can turn that dishwasher back into a lean, clean washing machine. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.